On today's talk, I'm going to address an issue that I keep hearing over and over again, especially from, one guy. To him, everything is white supremacy. Everything. And I think I'm going to title this, White Supremacy is Not Your Problem. Because we love to be victims, black people in this society. Whenever something unfavorable happens in the black community, we can always find a reason or excuse as to why it happened. And one of the biggest excuses we use is white supremacy. It's funny and sad at the same time to hear black celebrities talk about white supremacy while they live in gated communities surrounded by white people. However, that supremacy is really not the real supremacy. And we just don't realize it. But for this particular talk, we're gonna go with that. We're gonna go with white supremacy is the problem. Now, if we take away white supremacy tomorrow, since we say that is our biggest threat, what would actually change in our homes, our neighborhoods, and our communities? Would removing that roadblock teach us how to be better financial stewards of our money? I mean, come on, let's face it. We buy our kids a lot of unnecessary name brand items like shoes and clothing. We buy them gaming systems and every new game they ask for, even the ones that promote violence. However, we will not take those same dollars and spend it on their education. We will not provide them the tools to work with in school because we have the entitlement mentality that someone else is responsible for their needs. And my sister's been in the school system for years. My brother-in-law's been in the school system for years. I have another sister that's been in the school system for years. And they're teaching, and they always talk about how my brother-in-law's not in the classroom anymore, but they always talk about how these kids come to school and don't have pen and paper. But we have this entitlement mentality that someone else is responsible for our kids' needs. Our responsibility is to just give them what they want. So we wait for the local church or the area neighborhood school to send out notifications for the back to school drive because it's somebody else's responsibility. If we ended white supremacy tomorrow, would it actually make our kids study harder and do better in school? Does white supremacy stop us from buying life insurance so we don't burden our families with the task of trying to figure out how to bury us without going into massive debt to do so? I mean, because basic funeral costs roughly $10,000. And, I know some of you might say, well, that's not a lot of money. Well, how many of you have a spare $10,000 laying around? I said spare $10,000. And white supremacy is not the cause of that. Does white supremacy cause us to be poor stewards of our money? Or is it our poor and poverty conditioning and upbringing that has us thinking and living that way? How do you know if you have poor and poverty thinking? Look around your house. How many books do you see? A rich man's house is filled with books, and a poor man's house is filled with all the latest gadgets and the biggest television he can fit on his wall space. And I'm not just talking about financial riches, because there are books on everything. You can become rich in marriage. You can become rich in relationships. You can become rich in health. I mean, it's riches on every level. If white supremacy ended tomorrow, would that cause our men to come back home and be responsible and take care of all the illegitimate children they fathered? Would ending white supremacy stop our women from giving up their womb to all these irresponsible men? I mean, these are just some thought-provoking questions. And would it stop our men from fathering kids, multiple kids in the same city they live in, and many times across the country, especially if they play professional sports? Would it cause our men, and sometimes even our women, to abstain from the domestic violence issues that they inflict upon one another? Would ending white supremacy cause our men and women to now get married in order to build a family and work toward creating wealth? Would it cause our young men and women to learn something about self-love? I mean, think about it. Would it cause them to raise their self-esteem and increase their self-worth? I mean, we said white supremacy is an excuse for everything that ails us as a people. You know, that's according to us. Would ending it cause us to stop murder on demand of our babies who never had the chance to have a voice in our irresponsible behavior? And on the other hand, would it stop the illegitimate childbirth rate for the ones we do decide to keep? And I know some of you might be thinking, well, what does he advocate since he says we shouldn't abort and we shouldn't produce illegitimately? Well, I'm glad you asked. How about we get married and then have some kids in the bounds of marriage? Now, I'll always admit nothing is ever 100%, but it has been proven time and time again that a child reared in a two-parent home stands a much greater chance to succeed in life. And there are exceptions to every rule. I'll be the first to admit that. But it does a much greater service when a child is reared in a home that is more stable and has two active parents that are concerned about the well-being of the marriage relationship and the well-being of the children. Would ending white supremacy tomorrow stop our youth from killing each other in the streets? The mere fact that we kill each other has nothing to do with white people. Our youth operate from a spirit of self-hatred and a lack of identity. And it becomes much harder to pass identity to them when dad is not in the picture. Because as much as we have great mothers, identity is still passed to the children from their fathers, and the father only. Since no father's in the picture, our young men have to prove that they're men by killing each other and spreading their seed all over the place. Would ending white supremacy tomorrow cause more of us to get the entrepreneurial spirit and start to see things big, but humble ourselves long enough to start out small? I actually just read an article, was it yesterday or the day before? I can't remember off the top of my head. It might have been the day before. And it was talking about the things that parents do to produce successful kids. And one of those traits was they encouraged them to become entrepreneurs and to become rich. Another one was they also had high expectations for their children and wasn't ashamed to let them know about it. Another trait was the parents themselves model great relationships. And that can be your marriage, that can be your friendship, that can be how you work with others. All of that plays into relationships. Would ending it cause us to learn how to empower ourselves and realize that the only help we are going to receive as a people is at the end of our own arm? We have to face it. Nobody else is coming to rescue us. The core of the talented tent, you know, the black boule in your fraternities and sororities who make up the organization, their thought process has already proven that they only have concern for themselves until they feel like they've been violated against or they've been discriminated against. And then they want to come on their microphones and megaphones and everything else and running back to us that they had no concern about And then they want us to be a family again. They want us to be family with them long enough so they can raise themselves back up, and then they're going to leave us again. We got to wake up. Does white supremacy cause us to not even control the resources in our own communities? Now, I mean, I know some issues are out there. I'm not going to deny that. But we don't even try anymore. We'll support the local black barbershop, the local black beauty shop, the black-owned club, and the black cathedrals of commerce on Sundays. And I mean, even the people that ran away from the neighborhood, they'll come back on Sundays into the black church to get that feel-good, that feeling. But they still not doing anything for the community. But they want to say they still attached to the hood. That's only because they go to church there. But in that same respect, we want to support the local black store owner, the local black author, or the black man or woman who has a viable product to sell. Will our women get off the street and out of the strip clubs if white supremacy were to end tomorrow? Will our young men stop selling drugs in the street to one another? That's going to lead to prison for the seller and a slow death sentence for the end user. Now, would ending white supremacy tomorrow stop all of that? I know many of you will say that whites drop the drugs in our communities, and I'm familiar with Freeway Ricky Ross over there and the Iran-Contra deal for the drugs and all that other stuff. I'm familiar with all of that stuff, and I know they drop the stuff in the communities. I know it. I mean, especially over there in the Compton, California area. I played ball in college with 3 guys from that area. They didn't choose to sell the drugs. But I know many of you are going to say they drop the drugs in our communities. And like I said, although there's some truth to that, do you have to willingly participate in selling those drugs, using those drugs? Will ending white supremacy tomorrow stop these predatory pedophiles that our women allow into their lives and their homes from raping our little boys and girls? The phrase white supremacy was magnified by blacks who don't believe in God. And the ironic thing about these blacks is they have made it educationally. And they also have a degree of financial comfort. But they tell you white supremacy is actually keeping you down. Although they keep telling us about the ills of white supremacy, they somehow managed to make it in many of the white supremacy universities and companies. Either we become controlled by white supremacy, or we learn how to become directed by God, not religion. Whatever we give power to, control and rule over us, will do exactly what we allow it to do. And I mean, just think about that statement. Not once did I say white supremacy doesn't exist. But as I mentioned in the very beginning, that supremacy is really not the issue. If you want to find an answer on what the real issue is, I'm going to make you do some homework, but I'm going to give you the name. You would actually need to read a book written by a true white supremacist named Ben Klassen. And the title of that book is The White Man's Bible. Now, if you do venture out, and it's available in print and digital form. So if you don't want to pay for it, you don't even have to pay for it. You can just put the title White Man's Bible by Ben Klassen in a search mode, and it'll give you access to the digital copy. Now, it's not a quick, fast read. It's a pretty lengthy book. But if you really want to know where the problem lies, read that book. And like I said, this guy's openly racist. But he lays the truth out there for what a real problem is. But like I said, if we ended it tomorrow, what would change in the black community? Would it make us believe in our capacity to be and do better as individuals first and then as a people? Would it cause us to treat one another with a little more love, a little more respect? Would it cause us to start to look out for our neighbors and the kids in the neighborhood like black folks once did? Would it cause us to respect the differences of opinion, especially when it comes to politics? Would it cause us to take some pride where we live and keep the air around our homes and streets clean? Would it stop our young men from purse snatching and breaking into people's homes? In more cases than not, in the same communities of other people, black folks that are struggling just like them, that go to work hard every day and trying to keep their head above water. Does white supremacy cause that? I mean, it bothers me. You know, does white supremacy make our young ladies not say thank you when a man holds the door open for them to walk through? Does it cause our young men to just blatantly disrespect authority, especially black male authority? Does white supremacy cause our men to dishonor our women? And does it cause our women to rebel against our men? Now think about everything I mentioned. Does white supremacy have anything to do with any of that? I mean, everything I asked a question about. It all stems from a lack of morals. It all stems from a lack of character. It all stems from a lack of faith. It all stems from a lack of respect. White supremacy has nothing to do with that. Those are principles. That's all, nothing else. You can never violate principles because they're going to always be. Once we're all gone, principles are going to still be there. So, white supremacy is not the problem. The problem is when you go into that bathroom or the bedroom and you look at that mirror, and that's where you'll find the problem at. That's where each one of us will find the problem at. It's not white supremacy. It's your face. It's your mentality. It's your thinking. It's your upbringing. It's your environment. It's your community. It's the people you hang with. It's the people you party with. It's the people you play sports with. It's the people around you because they have the same poor mentality that you do. They have the same bad mentality that you do. It's not white supremacy. It's black people. Like I said, it's the culture. It's the environment. Now, listen to this. I played football. I ran track for a number of years. You know, I ran track when I was a little kid, elementary school. I didn't run in middle school, but I ran in high school as well until my knee got injured playing football. But I did play football, you know, through part of college. And we encourage our young men to play sports so that one day they can hopefully get drafted into the professional ranks and earn those big paychecks. And since almost all of the professional sports teams are owned by white guys, isn't this the ultimate form of white supremacy? So why do we encourage it? We even say stupid things like pro sports is modern day slavery. Where can any slave go and earn that type of income? But the funny thing is, we never say the white athletes are slaves, just the black ones. I've never heard a black person say that Tom Brady or Peyton Manning or the great Wayne Gretzky, hockey player, Mario Lemieux, hockey player, Larry Bird, Larry Zonka, brutal fullback for the Miami Dolphins, Dick Butkus, the fiercest linebacker that ever played a game. Never heard one black person say any of those guys were slaves. So I guess the only slaves in the professional ranks are the black athletes. And if black athletes are high paid slaves, then what are the rest of us? We cannot rise above our current thinking. So something has to change within our thought process. Something has to change. We got our bad programming, all of our bad programming, before we turned age 7. And who's controlling your environment up to age 7? Your parents and your schools. So that's where all of your bad programming came from, more so your parents, because you start getting that thought process before you were ever released from the womb. So more so it's with your parents. We give too much energy and power to white supremacy. We need to redirect that energy into more positive and productive things. And many blacks have actually told me that God left us. We've been following him forever, and our situation hasn't improved as a people. Well, if you want to, we can set up a Bible study one day and air that all out and see what the reasons are. But for this talk, I'm just going to say our situation hasn't improved because we became religious and not godly. Our forefathers and mothers, when they came out of slavery, they became godly. And once each generation coming after that continued to advance, they wanted to do less with God and wanted to do more with religion. And like I said, that's going to be a different talk for another time. Our God is greater than white supremacy or any other supremacy or any racism or anything else you want to throw out there as an excuse as to why you're not making it.